So we're talking this year about living this everyday wonder. As Matt said earlier, every day is a vacation day, a day in paradise. And today we're talking about reclaiming oneness, which is kind of what Reverend Michael was talking about, this idea that we can choose at any moment to feel and know ourselves as whole, perfect, and complete, or we can be so affected by the external circumstances in our life that we forget. We just forget. Our natural state of being is and always is oneness and wholeness. And yet this, the stuff of life sticks itself to us like a cloak sometimes, and we can forget. We are always living as one, in harmony with the planet, with nature, and all living beings, including ourselves. And if we truly believe that God is all that there is, then we can always live in a way that reflects this truth. So we choose, as we come together in times like this, in meditation and other times in our day and in our week, we choose to live in a way that reflects this truth. So we move away from just saying the words or just doing the activity, the meditation or the affirmation. And we move into really looking at, understanding, comprehending how this truth shows up in our lives and making it that daily, sustainable practice to let go of that cloak and to stand and radiate in the beauty and the wholeness of our being. So this month is that invitation to explore and deepen our connection with God as everything and everyone, starting with ourselves and including this amazing living planet. Ernest Holmes said, the ultimate cause in back of all things must be one. And he wrote one, capital O, capital N, capital E, like he's screaming it from the mountaintops. Everything in back of all things must be one, since life cannot divide against itself. The infinite must be one, for there could not be two infinite beings. Whatever change takes place must take place within this one, but this one must be changeless, because it being the one and only, it could not change into anything except itself. So the unifying cause is God itself, life itself, and life cannot be divided against itself, and we are a part of life. We are life itself. So the cells in our bodies cannot be divided against the capital B body, the body of God, or there would be no life. The same is true for the planet. Life is a symbiotic, organic, living harmony of all its parts. And as humans, we have lost sometimes this knowledge and that deep connection to each other. You know, we see each other as separate, and so we decide we are separate. But as we talked about last month, you know, we don't have to look any further than how we treat ourselves, our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with our fellow human beings, and our relationship to the planet, how we treat the planet, the animals, the creatures of the planet, to see that we are out of balance. Life is never out of balance. And only we can heal that division that we ourselves have created. So today, let's reclaim our oneness and know that there is only one life. And I was reminded this week that this reclaiming process, because I always want to jump into, oneness and wholeness, but this reclaiming process has what we could call stages. Most spiritual traditions have their sort of definitions and guidelines for these stages of consciousness or stages of self-realization. And I was reminded of the stages of consciousness that were put forth by my teacher, Reverend Michael Beckwith. And he had a very interesting and concise way of talking about 4 stages. But let's know, as I discuss them, that they're not necessarily linear, and they're not, within each stage is substages and substages, so but this is a nice broad way to look at it. And most of us will recognize this first stage. It's what we call victim consciousness, or we call it for short that to me consciousness, because it's where we perceive that everything in life is happening to me, that I have no control over anything in life, that I am a victim of my upbringing, my parents, my social economic status, my race, my gender, my bodily limitations, all these things. And even if I had experienced a great upbringing, a wonderful life, when we remain in this consciousness, it means that I will always be afraid that that will be taken away because I'm a victim. It's all happening to me. What if it's taken away? So there's always the fear of the stock market crashing, the economic indicators falling, the real estate market tanking, whatever it is. Even if I'm a victim to all the good things, I have that victim mentality that bad things can and will happen. So for most people, almost everyone, they are in this stage and they can't even imagine that there are other stages or other levels of awareness because they haven't explored the world's mystic traditions, or even they're at the mystic tradition in which they were brought up, if they were brought up in one. So the second stage is shortened to by me. And I say it a little different than Reverend Michael, but the second stage is by me. So the first stage is to me, and then it's by me. It's where we realize that we can affect and change the outcomes in our life. It's when we learn the law of attraction, the principle of positive thinking, the power of affirmations. We learn through action, we can manipulate and manifest change for our good. And, sometimes not for our highest good. In other words, the laws work whether we're working them for our highest good or just for something we think we want. In this stage, we know lots of people who work really hard to get what they want, and they have changed their mind. They're going to change the situations and events in their life that seem to have held them back. They're going to overcome great difficulties only to realize their dreams, and yet they're still not happy. So this stage is called by me because I'm using the laws of the universe, the laws of life, to move and to manifest and to manipulate the situations and events and circumstances in my life. And it is a powerful place to be, but you can see why there might be another level of consciousness. That third stage is called through me. And it's when I realize that there is this higher good, a higher power. We can call that spirit or God or the love intelligence that creates the universe, the Lord or the law. It's working through me. And I can release in this stage this idea that I have to do the work to make things happen, that I have to change my mind, that I have to create. This is a stage of surrendering to a higher good. And Mickey Singer talks about it in his book, The Surrender Experiment. And it's just a great book if you haven't read it yet. And in this stage, we give up making things happen and allow ourselves to connect deeply with this flow of life. And we find ourselves guided to experience our highest good, which will always be a greater expression of love and of joy and of peace and of oneness. So we are coming back to the idea of the oneness and wholeness of all life in this level of consciousness. And the fourth and final stage is called as me. So to me, by me, through me. And now we're calling this as me. It's a unity consciousness. And it's kind of what I was talking about last week, last time I spoke with the Thich Nhat Hanh paper, and you see the interconnectedness of all life. And in all of life is in all of everything, right? The thing, the situation, the relationship is God expressing. And in this stage, there is no surrender. Isn't that interesting? There's no surrender because there's only one thing that is happening, and we recognize ourselves as it. And it is this blissful, peaceful, and joyful knowingness. And yet we still retain that sense of who we are within it. When I spoke to my son, Max, about what I was going to be talking about, and I just told him pretty much what I just told you guys, and he just thought about it for a minute. And he said, you know, I pretty much go in and out of the first three stages all the time. And I said, yeah, that's right. You know, most of us do. When we know these principles and practices, we kind of flit about in those three stages. And then he said, but I get to that fourth stage when I really am still and decide to be aware. And I'm like, you got it, kid. That's all it takes. It's not exotic. It's not hard to do. It's not some crazy levitating state or walking on water. It's right there where we are in our breath. And as I said, these stages aren't linear. There's no boundary. We don't sit in one and incubate and graduate to the next one. We float in and out of them. And depending on our personalities and what we're going through each day, you know, how long we stay in each level of awareness just depends on the time that we take to meditate and train ourselves and to become aware of what we are doing and what is happening. When we get that email notification and the stock market has plummeted and our 401k is suffering, we might have that panic moment of being a victim to the stock market, you know, our money market accounts. And it may last a few minutes or a few days or a few weeks, depending on who we are, where we are. And then we might remember, oh, wait, there's a truth in here. There's an absolute truth in here. My source and supply is not out there. It's right here. And when I turn within, you know, I might be called to do some action, some stage 2 affirmation, some stage 2, you know, meditation. And then I might go into stage 3, tapping into the source that I am reminds me that all is well. God's got this. That's that phrase, God's got this. That's that level 3. Surrendering within and not living in the outer effects, but knowing ourselves as sourced by spirit within, and then floating up into that fourth phase is this idea that everything we see, everything we participate in, everything we know is the unfoldment of God. And we are connected to it, this integral part of the divine plan, the thread of the tapestry that is the whole and the all of life. So what do we learn as we move into reclaiming oneness and wholeness from the realization that we might be in these stages, and other people are for sure in these stages, floating in and out? Well, first, even if someone is stuck in stage one, because none of us are, I can tell you that right now. None of us are stuck at stage one. We probably wouldn't be here. But if we see or know people who are stuck in the consciousness, the victim consciousness, where they think everything is happening to them, we know the difference. We understand that they believe that they are under the influence of their parents' parents, the economic markets, and all these things. They're under the influence of past mistakes or abuse or loss or lack. And we understand where they are coming from. We can see them as the child of God, and we have compassion and empathy. And this is the gifts for ourselves of recognizing where people are, how they are. We develop our sense of compassion and empathy. And usually, because it begins by developing compassion and empathy for others, then we understand we can turn around and remember to love ourselves when we have been limited by our thoughts and our experiences. And we become more compassionate and empathetic. So reclaiming our oneness brings with it that deep sense of compassion and empathy for one another. And number two, there's a freedom that comes from understanding that we're not victims of our circumstance, that we're co-creators. There is freedom and power. So stepping out of the victim consciousness is stepping into freedom, and stepping into that by me consciousness is the freedom to create something new. We learn to change our thoughts, change our mind, change our habits, change how we feel. And so that we attract and create a new condition, a new situation, a new relationship. And the first time that we ever do that, there is the expansion of power and freedom in our life. We're no longer victims. And we have a unique understanding of the way the universe works. It may not be completely developed understanding, but it is a powerful place to be. So reclaiming our oneness brings with it the freedom and the power to create, to see ourselves as creative beings. And third, when we understand that God is working through us, that third stage, we are able to let go of this need to manifest, to manipulate, and even to think and search for that new idea. Because now we are that open, spacious consciousness, which allows the highest idea of who we are in a moment to flow through us. You know, I never liked the word surrender when I was growing up in the Catholic tradition. I didn't really like it in my early CSL training, and I didn't really like it in ministerial training either, because I didn't really understand what surrender meant in a mystical sense. And Mickey Singer's book helped with that a lot. But when we recognize that we are sourced from within, that we are the expression of God itself, we're not surrendering to that idea, that concept of a God up there, out there that we cannot reach, that is infinitely distant from ourselves. We're surrendering to ourself with a capital S, our highest being, our own conscious awareness. And now understanding that, I can use, lovingly and joyfully the word surrender, but words like allowing or receiving or participating in the flow. that worked for me to get to this place. So when we surrender, when we allow ourselves to be in this flow, we find ourselves allowing solutions and resolutions to the situations in our life which we couldn't have imagined before, because we're not thinking them, right? From that place of that finite mind, we're not making them up. We're allowing the creative thought of unlimited mind to move us. We couldn't have created those from our own finite mind and limited thinking. That by me mentality or consciousness. So we surrender and find ourselves in the flow of life. And one of the biggest benefits to this stage of consciousness is the release of stress. We understand that everything that is happening in our lives is for our highest good. And when we let go of the stress of trying to make the highest good happen, right? It's got to be my way. When we let that go, we're just in the flow, stressless. There's still boulders, there's rocks, and there's sometimes huge drop-offs, but we're the water. So reclaiming our oneness brings with it surrender and the revealing of this highest good that we previously could not have imagined. And fourth, when we flow into that unity consciousness, that God consciousness, the veil that separates what is me and what is everything else, what is spiritual and what isn't, what is God and what isn't, oh, that disappears. And we see, every animal, every creature, everyone, everywhere, every feeling, every breeze, sunrise and sunset, it's all God. And this idea of unity consciousness as me means that we can't hurt, harm, or endanger ourselves or another for any reason. It would be like hurting ourselves, and it would feel like hurting ourselves because there's just one. From this perspective, this consciousness that even those that are in victimhood, even those that are at any other level, we see wholeness and perfection within them, even though we might have to deal with what they're presenting us with, their lack, their limitation, their blame, whatever that is. But we can see the truth and discern how to deal with that in our lives. We may have to deal with angry or unjustified behavior of someone or a group of people, but we can still love them while we're making decisions about, discerning how to be with them or not be with them. Decisions based on loving behavior, loving actions, and loving outcome, because everything's about love, unconditional love for each other. All of our personal relationships, which we talked about last month, support our ability to choose love in every decision. Everything we eat, every movement in our bodies, every song that we listen to, television show that we watch, every event we participate in is a choice to love ourselves and love others. And it's funny because you think that would be kind of tedious, right? It sounds like if you had to think about all that, it might get a little frustrating, but it's not tedious because it's inspired. Inspired is in spirit. And it's that idea that there's no difficult decision. It's a movement towards our highest good always. And this self-fulfilled, self-loving energy that we don't need to get from anything or anyone. exuding it, we're being it. So reclaiming our oneness brings with it this simple and profound knowing of God as everything and everyone. And I don't think there's anything more loving or joyful or blissful than that. I mean, we can't ask for anything that would give us that. And we already have it. We already are it. So knowing these, does this help you kind of see places where you are, maybe daily or weekly in your life? Are you checking the stock market? Are you checking the real estate, mortgage rates, or whatever it is? And, sometimes we let go and remember the truth of our being and what stage are we in, from that idea that all these things are happening to me, or the next stage of trying to manipulate and change things that we no longer want to deal with. Are we relaxing in the flow of our highest good as the expression of God itself? Or being even more in the flow and seeing this unity of all life and being in love and sensing this love from within that cannot be contained. That loving life force energy pushes itself out into all that we do. And, I want, as always, I hope, I hope we bring it back down to being real, flowing in and out of these states. And, if somebody cuts us off in the car and the first thought is, why is this person doing this to me? Or driving on this road is always so hard, or I hate, blah, blah, whatever it is. And that's okay, because most of us here are going to flip that thought in just a few minutes. Like, oh, listen to me. We become aware of our thoughts. We become aware of our own consciousness, because we have the ability to be aware of ourselves. And we go right into that second mode of like, hey, driving down the PCH or the A1A, I'm participating, I'm in the flow. We have the affirmations, I am safe in my car wherever I go. We go into that by me stage, and it may only take a few minutes to really sense ourselves in the flow of this traffic. And we go into that third stage. And honestly, the joy of driving, whether we're on a freeway or somewhere else, is being in that fourth stage of just seeing everything as God unfolding. Really blessing the running of errands or whatever is happening. But human behavior is natural and normal as it pops up. If we're reading our Facebook feed and some group or person makes a comment that we have that initial reaction to. But as we train ourselves and our awareness of the truth of our being, we can sink into that deeper realization at any moment. And we can use the tools that are available in every stage of consciousness to, to develop compassion and empathy, to allow our sense of power and freedom, and to experience the surrender or the allowing, and then to just rest in that deepest realization that God is really all that is ever happening. And we are a witness to the all expressing. So this week we can affirm, I am one with all people, all creatures, all life everywhere. I am one.